Well, Anthony Albanese's hopes of securing bipartisan support for a constitutionally enshrined Indigenous voice to Parliament have been dashed after the Nationals said they would oppose the proposal in a countrywide vote. Joining me now live is Nationals leader David Littleproud. Thank you so much for joining us. How did you come to this position? How many First Nations people did you actually consult with?
Yeah, look, we consulted with both the yes and no side, and there's Indigenous Australians that support this and Indigenous Australians that don't. And the two key architects of this, Professor Megan Davis and also Pat Anderson, were key to our consultation. But for our members, it was about talking to our traditional owners, our elders, and getting a lens on their take of whether this would put another layer of bureaucracy rather than go to the heart of shifting the dial on closing the gap. And when you look at regional, rural and remote Australia, it's different to cities. And the challenges that are there and the bespoke model that's required, because the challenges are different from one community to the next. I mean, I represent 10% of the Australian landmass. Let me tell you that the challenges in Warwick and Stanthorpe are different to that in Roma. And so if you have a model and go down a model that we're going to go down, which is the Al-Latsik model of sending a couple from a cohort across a large geographical area, then you won't bring in the empowerment of local traditional owners at a local level with local solutions. And while we respect the government in trying to shift the dial and closing the gap, what we're saying is we can't get comfort for that for regional, rural and remote Australians. And for that reason, we don't want to support a principle on a principle basis, but also a mechanism that won't do that, won't achieve empowerment of Indigenous communities at a local level.
Are you worried, though, about the consequences of your position? Have you essentially killed any possibility of debate on this?
No, this is about creating a debate. We live in a democracy. No one should be afraid to have a point of view or to express it, but they should express it in a respectful way. And that's what we've done, is we've consulted widely, we've understood the issues, we live with much of these issues. Many of our representatives live in the communities where these challenges are faced. And so we should create an environment where a constructive conversation can take place, where Australians in the sanctity of their homes make up their minds about how we best close the gap. And that's the core tenet that we should get back to, is what is the best way to close the gap in some of these communities quicker than we need. We've got to understand, in some communities we don't need to close the gap at all. Indigenous Australians aren't disadvantaged, and we shouldn't stereotype. And I think, but the government obviously has taken a stance, and we respect that, and I respect the Prime Minister and Linda Burney for wanting to lead on this. We're just saying that we think there's a better way, that's all. And I think so long as we can have a constructive conversation about it and Australians make their mind up, then we can have that as a mature country and as a nation that holds the tenet of democracy dear to us.
All right, let's move on now. Will you support a censure motion against Scott Morrison?
No, this is a political stunt. I mean, I was the first to call Scott Morrison out for his behaviour. He did the wrong thing. No one can deny that. What we should focus on is the reforms that were in this report. We should do that in a bipartisan way to protect the very precious institutions of our democracy here in Australia. But to focus and to take up the time of the Parliament for a political stunt says to the Australian people that this Parliament hasn't grown up. We are more focused on politics than on them. When you've got a cost of living crisis, shouldn't we be focused on their energy bills, on their grocery bills and on their mortgages? I mean, really, this is nothing more than a petty political stunt. Should
he have quit after the election?
Well, that's up to him and the people of Cook. You can't tell a Member of Parliament to resign. I think Scott Morrison will obviously make his considerations about his future in this Parliament in the future, and that's up to him, but it's something he should consult the people of Cook with, because he has a contract with them. He was elected as the member for Cook, and they are his ultimate boss.
All right, just finally, I want to talk to you about the Great Barrier Reef. A UN-backed mission says it should be placed on a list of World Heritage Sites now in danger. It also says that Australia has failed to protect the reef. The government you were a part of was warned about this. Was it an oversight by the previous government?
No, we put billions of dollars into protecting the reef. Practical measures, supporting also farmers in making sure that they have world best practice, making sure there's no runoff. I mean, the UN sits in an air-conditioned office thousands of kilometres away, making and giving gratuitous advice about an Australian piece of precious environment that the Australian people have done a lot themselves to protect, and the Australian government has with their money. So we've done a lot to protect the reef, we've done a lot to protect the environment, we've lived up to our international commitments. We should be very proud of not only how we manage the environment, but how we've also reduced emissions. Australia's done more than most countries around the world, and we should continue on that trajectory in a sensible way that makes sure that the environment's protected, the reef's protected, but also industry's protected.
David Littleproud, we have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us this morning.